Subscribe to Echo Tales for deeply emotional, romantic, and mature stories that echo through your heart. Don't forget to like, share, and comment to support meaningful storytelling. It was a calm, rainy Sunday evening. The streets were quiet, and the soft sound of raindrops tapping against the windows filled Professor Eli Hart's home. He lived alone in a small, cozy townhouse filled with books and memories. That night, he had just finished grading papers when he heard a knock at the door. It was unexpected. Strange, even. He rarely had visitors, especially not at this hour. Curious, he walked to the door and opened it slowly. And there she was. Maya, his student. She stood there in the rain, her long dark hair wet, her clothes clinging to her as if the storm outside had followed her all the way to his doorstep. But what caught his attention most were her eyes. Red from crying, tired, lost, and full of something unspoken. She looked up at him, her lips trembling, and whispered, "I'm sorry, Professor. I didn't know where else to go." Her voice was soft, almost breaking, like a delicate string pulled too tight. Eli's heart skipped a beat. He knew this moment was unusual, dangerous even. Teachers weren't supposed to open their homes to students. But Maya wasn't just any student. She was brilliant, thoughtful, full of life and sadness at the same time. And right now, she was clearly in pain. He hesitated for just a second. Every rule in his head screamed at him to stay professional, but the look in her eyes silenced them all. He stepped back and said gently, "Come in." Maya walked in slowly, her steps quiet, unsure. Eli offered her a towel and helped her dry off. She looked so fragile in that moment, like a story that could crumble if not handled with care. He made her a warm cup of tea, and they sat in the living room, the silence between them soft and full of questions. Neither of them spoke at first. They just listened to the rain and the hum of the kettle. Then, finally, Maya looked at him, her fingers still wrapped around the warm mug, and said, "I wasn't going to come here tonight, but you once said in class that books make us brave. I think I needed to be brave tonight." Her words surprised him. He remembered that lesson. It was about love letters and classic novels. She had stayed late that day to talk about her favorite story. He remembered how her eyes lit up then. Tonight, they were dimmer, but still carried the same fire. She reached into her bag and pulled out a folded letter, slightly wrinkled from the rain. Her hands shook as she gave it to him. "It's from my mother," she whispered. "She passed away last week." Eli felt something shift in the air. He hadn't known. He had noticed her absence from class, but he never guessed the reason. His chest felt heavy, and he said softly, "Maya, I'm so sorry." She looked down at her hands. "I dropped out to take care of her," she said. "You were the only teacher who noticed I was gone." That made Eli feel something strange. Sadness, guilt, maybe even tenderness. Maya continued. Before she passed, she wrote this. She said, "You reminded her of my father, the kind of man who listens, who sees people." Eli looked at her, stunned, not knowing what to say. Maya's voice was almost a whisper now. "I guess I needed to see if she was right." And in that moment, in the quiet warmth of his home, something unspoken passed between them. Something tender, real, and deeply human. It wasn't just about grief or comfort. It was something more, something that neither of them could name yet. The room felt warmer now, but not just because of the tea. Something invisible had settled between Eli and Maya. Something soft, something delicate. They sat across from each other, the steam from their mugs curling up like whispers in the quiet air. Outside, the rain still fell, but inside, the world felt still. like a moment caught between two heartbeats. Maya looked tired, but there was a calm in her eyes now. A strange kind of peace. She stared into her cup for a long time before speaking, again. "I kept this letter in my bag for days," she said. "I didn't know if I was ready to open it, or share it." Eli watched her carefully, his heart caught in his chest. He wasn't just listening like a teacher now. He was listening like a man who felt something stir in the silence, something close, something dangerously gentle. Maya unfolded the letter slowly and passed it to him. He read the words carefully. Her mother's handwriting was neat, a little shaky, but full of warmth. She had written about Maya with so much love. And near the end, there was a part that made Eli pause. It said, "If Maya ever feels lost, I hope she finds someone like you. Someone who sees her, truly sees her." Eli looked up at Maya, unsure what to say. His throat felt tight. She gave him a faint smile, one that was full of sadness and something more. "My mom used to say I fall for people who don't notice me," Maya said quietly. "But with you, I always felt seen, even in a room full of students." Her voice was shaking now, but she didn't look away. Eli leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on his knees. "Maya," he began, his voice low, gentle. "I'm just your professor. I was just doing what any decent person would do." But even as he said it, he knew it wasn't completely true. He had noticed her more than others, the way she sat quietly in class, but always had something beautiful to say. The way she read poems like they were part of her soul. She was never just a student, and tonight, that truth was becoming harder to hide. "You weren't just doing your job," she said softly. "You cared." There was no accusation in her voice, just truth, simple and clear. For a while, they just sat like that, letting the weight of her loss and the strange closeness between them settle in. Then Maya started talking again, but not about her mother this time. About life, books, the way grief had changed her. Eli listened, really listened, and found himself laughing when she told a funny story about her mom correcting her grammar even while sick. They both smiled, and in that soft laughter, something loosened in the room. It felt lighter. But underneath the calm, there was tension. Slow, warm, and growing. Not loud, not rushed. Just there, like a song playing far away that you can't ignore. Eli found himself watching the way Maya touched her hair, the way her eyes moved when she remembered something. And Maya watched him too, her eyes lingering a little longer than before. "Do you ever think about how strange timing is?" she asked suddenly. "Like meeting someone too soon or too late?" Eli looked at her, his heart catching again. He didn't answer right away. But his silence was full of things he couldn't say out loud. How deeply he felt her presence, how wrong it might be, and how right it somehow still felt. And in that quiet, something tender bloomed. Something not yet spoken, but no longer hidden. As the rain outside softened to a gentle drizzle, something else softened inside the house too. The air between Eli and Maya felt different now. Warmer, more open, but also more charged. Time seemed to move slower, like it was giving them space to feel everything fully. They were no longer just teacher and student in that moment. They were two people sitting in the quiet, wrapped in grief, memories, and something far more delicate, an invisible thread slowly pulling them closer. Maya sat on the couch, her knees tucked under her, the steam from her second cup of tea rising. Between them, she looked relaxed for the first time that night, but her eyes still held a kind of quiet sadness. "I used to think love was supposed to be loud," she said, looking down at the tea. "Like fireworks or movie scenes. But lately, I think maybe it's the quiet moments that matter most. Eli looked at her, surprised by the honesty in her voice. He nodded slowly, understanding. The small moments are where love hides, he replied softly. She glanced at him then, her eyes meeting his in a long, still gaze. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't rushed. But it was deep. Something passed between them that words couldn't name. Something tender. Something real. They talked for hours about literature, about loss, about how certain poems reminded Maya of her mother. Eli shared stories too. Stories he rarely told anyone. And with each word, with each smile and silence, they grew closer. Not in a way that shouted, but in a way that whispered. Maya's laugh filled the room for the first time when Eli told her about his failed attempt at writing a novel in college. "You?" she said, grinning. "I thought you were born with a pen in your hand." Eli laughed with her, and for a moment, everything felt light. But the lightness didn't last long. Because underneath it all, there was still that quiet tension, that gentle longing neither of them knew how to name. It was in the way Eli noticed how Maya played with the end of her sweater when she was nervous, and in the way Maya's eyes followed him every time he got up to pour more tea. They weren't acting on anything, but they both knew. Something was there, and it was growing. Then came a moment, small, simple, but filled with weight. Maya looked at him seriously and asked, "Do you think we're crossing a line?" Eli's heart beat a little faster. He didn't know how to answer. Was it wrong to feel close to someone who had once sat in his class? Maybe. But she wasn't his student anymore. Not really. Not tonight. And the way she looked at him, it wasn't about school or lectures or essays. It was about being seen, being understood, being wanted. "I don't know," he said finally. "Maybe we are. Or maybe we're just human." Maya smiled softly at that. It wasn't a flirty smile. It was something deeper. She leaned back into the couch, her eyes shining with something almost like peace. "You make me feel safe," she said quietly, "and I haven't felt that in a long time." Those words hit Eli in a place he didn't expect. He looked at her, really looked at her, and something inside him shifted. She wasn't just a girl in pain. She was a woman. Brave, thoughtful, and heartbreakingly beautiful in her honesty. And for the first time that night, he realized he didn't want her to leave. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But neither of them said those words out loud. Instead, they sat in the growing stillness, letting the unspoken feelings rise and settle between them. Not touching, not rushing, just feeling, just breathing, and waiting for whatever might come next. Morning light began to stretch across the room, soft and golden, brushing over the wooden floor and the quiet walls. The rain had stopped, and a gentle silence took its place. Inside the house, everything felt still, but not empty. It was the kind of silence that held emotions too big for words. Maya stood by the front door now, her coat on, hair still slightly damp, and her bag slung over her shoulder. She looked different. Tired, yes, but lighter, like something heavy, inside her, had finally been let go. Eli stood a few steps behind her, hands in his pockets, eyes resting on her with a quiet kind of sadness. They both knew the night had changed something between them, but neither knew what to do with that change. Maya turned to face him one last time. "I should go," she whispered, her voice barely louder than a breath, "before it's harder to leave." That one sentence held so much more than it said. It held the feelings that had grown between them, the connection that had come so suddenly but felt so natural. Eli didn't speak right away. He wanted to say something that would let her know how much this night had meant to him. But all he managed was, "Will you come back to class?" His voice was gentle, but unsure, like he wasn't asking about school at all, but about whether she'd come back into his life somehow. Maya gave a soft smile, the kind that comes with both hope and goodbye. "Maybe," she said. "Maybe not. But I'll keep reading. That part of me is alive again. You helped with that." Her words touched him deeply, more than she probably knew. She turned slightly, ready to open the door, then paused. Something in her heart told her this couldn't end with just a quiet goodbye. Slowly, she stepped toward him, not to kiss, not to confess, but to do something much more intimate. She leaned in and rested her forehead gently against his. It was a small touch, but it carried 1,000 unspoken emotions. Her eyes closed, and for a moment, they just stood like that. Two people, holding on without holding each other. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" Eli asked, though his voice was low, full of feeling. "For seeing me, and not looking away." Her words made his chest ache, because he understood them too well. She didn't mean just tonight. She meant every moment he had noticed her in class, every moment he had cared without saying it. It was the kind of thank you that stays with you for years. Then, just as gently as she had come into his home, she stepped back, opened the door, and walked into the soft morning light. Eli didn't follow. He just stood there in the silence, watching the empty space she left behind. But somehow, that space didn't feel empty. It felt full. Full of what had been shared, what had been felt, and what had almost been said. He walked back into the room, sat down slowly on the couch, where they had talked and looked around. Everything looked the same, but nothing felt the same. Something about her had stayed. Something quiet. Something deep. And as the light grew brighter, he realized this wasn't just the end of a night. It was the beginning of a feeling that would echo inside him for a long time. Maybe forever. Some stories don't need a perfect ending. Sometimes, the most beautiful ones are the ones that leave you wondering, what if? What now? What next? And Eli knew, deep down, that whatever this was, it wasn't really over, not in his heart, not yet.